All right, get ready because we're about to take a deep dive today. And it's all about negotiation.
No negotiation.
Yeah, thanks to all the great material you sent our way.
Very cool.
We've got two courses from the Justice Institute of British Columbia.
Duh.
One is called Negotiation Fundamentals. The other is Advanced Negotiation.
Nice.
Clearly, you're trying to become a master negotiator.
It seems to be a popular topic, and for good reason.
Yeah.
I mean, most people, when they think about negotiation, they think, you know, kind of like a high-stakes business situation. But
Yeah.
really, negotiation is so much more than that. I think it's something that we do every day, probably without even realizing it.
It's true. I mean, like, even something simple, like trying to convince your partner to watch what you want to watch on TV,
Absolutely.
that's a negotiation.
Or haggling for a better price at like a flea market.
Totally.
It's
Yep.
all around us. And what I find interesting is that most of us sort of go into these everyday negotiations with a win-lose mentality.
Right.
But these courses offer a really different framework,
Yeah.
one that's based on collaboration and problem solving.
I like that. And the negotiation fundamentals course, I noticed, starts off with this scenario with these two people, Jay and Kenzie. It's like
Yeah.
a classic negotiation setup.
Yeah.
Jay is thinking about leaving their job as a sales rep to start their own business.
Okay.
And then we have Kenzie, who really needs a good sales rep for her company, which is called Maximum Promotions.
It's a great scenario because it highlights one of the most important concepts in negotiation,
Okay.
and that is BATNA, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement.
Okay.
So, if the deal falls through, you need to have a backup plan.
I see.
And most people think the BTNA is simply about, just having other options,
Right.
but it's much more strategic than that.
Okay, so it's not just, okay, well, if this doesn't work out, I'll just do this other thing.
Right. It's not just about having a plan B.
Yeah.
It's about really strengthening your BTNA, making it as good as it can be.
Okay.
So let's take Jay as an example. If their BTNA is to go and start their own business,
Yeah.
how can they make that even better, even before they go into a negotiation with Kenzie?
I see.
Maybe they start networking, building up a client list even before the negotiation starts.
So you're saying they're kind of like lining up their ducks in a row just in case.
Exactly. And that gives them leverage when they go into the negotiation.
Okay, so having a strong BATNA going in gives you more power?
It can completely change the whole dynamic.
I see.
So Jay can walk into that meeting with a lot of confidence,
Yeah.
knowing that they have a good alternative if things don't go their way.
Right.
And it works both ways, of course. What if Kenzie starts to explore, other sales models or maybe partnerships? That would mean that she doesn't need to rely so much on having one-star sales rep.
Oh, that's interesting.
So both sides can really benefit from strengthening their BATNA.
So it's almost like that pre-negotiation prep is just as important as the actual negotiation itself.
Absolutely. And that's where this collaborative mindset really comes in.
Okay.
It's not about trying to, outsmart or overpower the other side.
Yeah.
It's about working together to find solutions that work for everyone.
I like that. And the fundamentals course, I noticed, it goes into, the characteristics of what makes a really good negotiator in this kind of collaborative style.
Right.
So what are we talking about here? Like, what makes somebody a truly effective negotiator?
It's less about, being really good at talking
Yeah.
and more about being really good at listening.
Okay.
Effective negotiators are great at asking open-ended questions.
Like what kinds of questions?
Questions like, what are your biggest concerns about this proposal? Or help me understand, what does a successful outcome look like for you?
So you're trying to really understand what's behind their position.
Exactly. It's about really understanding why they're saying what they're saying.
Right.
This reminds me of that classic fence example that they use in the course
Oh, yeah.
to illustrate the difference between positional and interest-based negotiation
Yeah.
with the neighbors. Exactly. It's a classic example, but it's worth revisiting.
Yeah. Tell me more.
So we've got these two neighbors. They're arguing about a fence.
Okay.
One of them wants it to be really tall to keep their dog in.
Right.
The other one wants it to be really short because they want to preserve their view.
Of course.
So in a positional negotiation,
Yeah.
they would be stuck arguing about, how many feet or inches.
Right. 6 feet, 5 feet.
Exactly. It just becomes this battle of wills.
Yeah. And nobody wins.
Exactly. The relationship gets damaged, and they probably end up with a fence that nobody's really happy with.
Right.
But with a collaborative approach,
Yeah.
they start to explore the why behind their positions.
Okay.
So why does one neighbor want a tall fence?
Yeah.
Because they want to keep their dog safe.
Okay.
And why does the other neighbor want a short fence?
To enjoy the view.
Right. And once you understand those interests, then you can get creative.
I'm already thinking of solutions like what if they built it shorter with a little bit of lattice on top so the dog can't get out, but you can still see through.
Exactly. That's the power of focusing on interests rather than positions.
Yeah.
It just opens up all kinds of possibilities that you might not have even thought of before.
I love that. And then I noticed that the material goes on to talk about this idea of objective criteria.
Yes.
So how do those play into this whole collaborative approach?
Well, they're essential.
Okay.
Objective criteria are like impartial referees. They can help you to get away from just, subjective opinions
Okay.
and find a fair resolution.
I see.
So think of it like negotiating the price of something like, say, a vintage record player.
Okay.
So you've got a seller who's emotionally attached to this thing, thinks it's worth a fortune, wants $500 for it.
Of course.
You, on the other hand, you're thinking more like $200.
Right.
How do you bridge that gap?
Yeah.
You bring in some objective criteria.
Okay, so you're saying like maybe we look at comparable sales on eBay or we consult with a vintage audio expert.
Exactly. You find something external,
Right.
something impartial to help you determine a fair price.
It makes a lot of sense.
It takes the emotion out of it,
Yeah.
and it introduces a shared standard for making a decision.
This is making me rethink how I haggle at flea markets.
That's great.
I love it. And that's really just the beginning because the material you shared goes on to talk about even more advanced techniques in the advanced negotiation course, taking these fundamental concepts to a whole new level.
Right.
I am so intrigued. We've got to delve into those advanced techniques, but maybe we should take a little pause here and then come back fresh for part 2.
Sounds good.
All right, we'll be right back. Okay, so we're back, and I'm ready to dig into these advanced negotiation techniques.
All right.
Especially that material on dealing with those difficult negotiators because,
Yeah.
it's one thing to try to collaborate when you're working with somebody who also wants to find a win-win.
Right.
But what happens when you encounter those classic tactics that can totally derail the whole thing?
It's definitely more challenging when you're dealing with someone who's not playing fair. Luckily, the advanced negotiation course has some really good strategies for handling those tough situations.
I'm all ears. I have to admit, I think I've fallen prey to some of those tactics.
It happens to the best of us.
Probably without even realizing it.
Yeah.
So what are some of the warning signs to watch out for?
Well, one that can catch people off guard is the tactic of escalating demands.
Okay.
So you think you're close to a deal,
Right.
you've got all the major points worked out,
Right.
and then suddenly they hit you with something new.
Yeah.
Some request that they conveniently forgot to mention before.
Oh, I hate that. It's like they keep moving the goalposts.
Exactly. And it's usually designed to take advantage of the fact that you're already feeling a bit, impatient or frustrated.
Yay.
They want to push you to concede more
Yeah.
just to get it over with.
So how do you deal with that without getting sucked into like a battle of wills?
Well, the course really emphasizes the power of reframing.
Reframing.
So this isn't about pretending that their demands are reasonable or ignoring your own needs. It's more about shifting the focus away from confrontation and towards trying to understand their perspective.
Okay, so give me an example of what that looks like in a real negotiation.
Sure. Let's say you're negotiating a freelance contract, and you've already agreed on the scope of work and the timeline.
Okay.
But then as you're finalizing the details, they say, oh, and we'll need you to provide all the software licenses too.
Classic.
Right. So your instinct might be to get defensive and say, absolutely not. That wasn't part of the deal.
Right.
But with reframing, you take a breath and you say something like, I understand that software is necessary for the project.
Yeah.
Can you help me understand why you're asking me to provide the licenses rather than budgeting for it yourselves?
Okay, so you're acknowledging their needs, but you're also asking them to explain their reasoning.
Right. And that can often open up a space for a more collaborative solution.
I see.
Maybe you can compromise and share the cost of the licenses. Or maybe they can use a different software that's within their budget.
This reframing thing is amazing. It's like judo.
I like that analogy.
You're using their momentum against them.
Exactly.
And speaking of judo moves, the material also talks about the good cop, bad cop routine.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic.
I always picture like a dimly lit interrogation room.
Right. And it's surprising how often this tactic comes up, even in everyday negotiations.
It does.
Usually there are two people on the other side.
Right.
One of them plays the hardliner, makes unreasonable demands,
Yeah.
maybe even a little bit intimidating.
Okay.
And the good cop swoops in, all friendly and understanding.
Yeah, making you feel bad for even pushing back.
Right. They're trying to make you feel grateful for any concession they offer.
So how do you avoid getting played in that situation? Because it is kind of nice when the good cop comes in.
It's easy to feel relieved even if their offer isn't that great,
Right?
but the key is to remember that they're both playing a role.
Yeah.
It's a performance.
Okay.
And the best way to counter that is just to call it out.
Oh, really?
You can even do it playfully, like, okay, I see what you're doing here. Let's cut the theatrics and just focus on finding a solution that works for both of us,
Oh, I love that.
right? Because they're expecting you to play along.
Yeah.
So when you don't, it throws them off balance.
It's like saying, I see right through you.
Exactly. And then the other important skill when you're dealing with difficult negotiators is knowing when and how to say no.
Oh, that can be so hard. Especially if you're someone who doesn't really like conflict or you're worried about damaging the relationship.
I hear you, but saying no effectively is such a crucial skill in negotiation.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be, a harsh shutdown.
Okay.
The advanced negotiation course actually talks about this technique called the yes, no, yes model.
Yes, no, yes. What is that?
It's a really helpful way to navigate those tricky moments when you need to say no.
Okay.
So it involves saying yes to the principle or the goal that you both share,
Okay.
then clearly stating no to the specific request that you can't agree to,
Right.
and then offering an alternative yes.
So it's like yes, no, but yes.
Exactly. It's like a magic formula.
Okay, so give me a concrete example.
Let's go back to that vintage record player scenario.
Okay.
The seller's stuck on $500, and you're just not comfortable paying that much.
Right.
So using the yes, no, yes model, you could say, I understand you value this record player, and I agree it's a beautiful piece. Unfortunately, I can't afford to pay $500 for it. However, if you're open to other options, I would be willing to offer $300.
Yeah. Okay, so you're validating their feelings, but you're also holding firm to your limit and you're still leaving the door open for negotiation.
Exactly. And that initial yes is really important
Yeah.
because it softens the no.
Okay.
And it stops the other person from feeling like you're completely rejecting them.
I love this. It feels like such a good way to de-escalate a potentially tense situation.
It is. It's a really powerful tool for keeping the conversation flowing.
And this leads perfectly into another really interesting aspect that the material covers, which is the concept of power dynamics.
Ah, yes, power.
It can be such a loaded word, especially in the context of collaboration.
It can. But the course does a great job of kind of demystifying power dynamics
Okay.
and explaining that it's not really about dominance or control.
Right.
It's more about understanding where your power lies
Yeah.
and using it strategically.
So where does power actually come from in a negotiation? Most people probably assume it's all about your job title or your position.
That's a common assumption, but it's not always true.
Okay.
Power can come from all sorts of places.
Like what?
Your BATNA, for example, we already talked about that.
Right.
It can come from access to information,
Okay.
your expertise, your reputation, even your network of contacts.
So you're saying that someone who might appear lower down in the hierarchy could actually have more power in a negotiation?
Absolutely, if they bring something unique to the table that the other side needs.
I see.
So, for example, let's say a big company is trying to acquire a small startup.
Okay.
On paper, it looks like the big company has all the power.
Yeah, for sure.
But if that startup has a patent on a game-changing technology
Okay.
that the big company needs, well, suddenly the power dynamic shifts.
Right, because now the little guy has something that the big guy wants.
Exactly. So we shouldn't make assumptions about power based on superficial things.
That's such a good point.
The advanced negotiation course encourages us to really look deeper and understand that power can be very fluid.
Yeah.
It can come from unexpected places.
I'm thinking back to times where I felt powerless in negotiations. And maybe it's because I didn't fully appreciate my own leverage.
I think we've all been there.
Or I didn't really understand what was motivating the other side.
And that's why it's so important to develop these skills.
Yeah.
Because as we become more aware of these dynamics,
Right.
we can approach those situations with a lot more confidence and clarity.
This is all so helpful, honestly. I'm already feeling much more equipped to handle my next negotiation,
That's great to hear.
even if it involves some of those tricky tactics or power imbalances.
And believe it or not, there's even more to explore.
Oh, no.
The materials you shared go even deeper into advanced techniques for things like managing impasses
Okay.
and developing creative solutions, and even navigating cultural differences in negotiations.
This deep dive is turning into like a masterclass in negotiation.
It is pretty comprehensive.
So much good stuff. So I think we need a moment to digest all of this before we tackle those final, fascinating layers of negotiation mastery.
Let's take a break.
All right, well, I'm back, and my brain is like officially in negotiation overdrive after that last part.
It's a lot to take in.
We covered so much good stuff.
We did.
But I do want to explore one more area. The material touches on these advanced techniques for dealing with negotiation roadblocks.
Yeah, those moments that can be really tricky.
Impasses, creative solutions, even cultural considerations.
Right, because even with the most collaborative approach, you're going to run into some obstacles sometimes.
Sure. So let's start with impasses. What happens when you're in a negotiation and it feels like you're going in circles? You're not making any progress.
Well, the advanced negotiation course suggests something really simple.
Okay.
Take a break.
A break. But wouldn't that, like, disrupt the flow? Make it harder to regain momentum?
It seems counterintuitive,
Yeah.
but actually taking a break can be really helpful,
Okay.
especially when emotions are running high or when you just feel stuck.
Right.
Even just stepping away from the table for a few minutes can make a big difference.
Like hitting the pause button.
Exactly.
Hmm.
It gives everybody a chance to cool down, clear their heads, and maybe rethink their priorities.
Yeah. And while you're at it, grab some popcorn.
Exactly.
I like this analogy. And I guess during that break, you could also take some time to revisit your BATNA,
That's a great point.
just to remind yourself of your options.
Right. It can be very empowering to remember what you're willing to walk away to.
It takes the pressure off,
Yeah.
so you don't feel like you're desperate.
Exactly. Now, if a break isn't enough, the course also suggests considering a neutral third party,
Oh, interesting.
like a mediator. Exactly. Or a facilitator, someone who can come in with fresh eyes and help to bridge the divide.
Right.
A skilled mediator can really help to reframe the issues and uncover those underlying interests that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
They can help to facilitate a more productive dialogue.
So they're not actually imposing a solution, but they're kind of guiding the conversation towards a better outcome.
Exactly. They're like negotiation ninjas.
I like that.
And this leads into the next challenge, which is finding creative solutions.
Right?
And the material emphasizes brainstorming as a really powerful tool for doing this.
Brainstorming, I do love a good brainstorming session.
Me too.
Like letting your imagination run wild.
Exactly. And the key is to just let go of judgment for a while
Okay.
and encourage everyone to share their ideas, no matter how crazy they might sound at first.
Right, because sometimes those wild ideas can lead to a breakthrough.
They absolutely can. It's like when you're working on a jigsaw puzzle and you can't find the right piece.
Yeah.
Then you try a piece that didn't seem to fit at all, and suddenly it clicks into place.
Perfect analogy. I love it. And it highlights that negotiation is not just about logic and strategy, but also about tapping into that creative energy.
Absolutely. It's about thinking outside the box, challenging those assumptions, and being open to unexpected solutions.
Well, this has been such an incredible deep dive.
It has.
Honestly, I'm starting to see negotiation everywhere in my life now.
I think that's a good thing.
And I feel so much more equipped to handle those situations with confidence. That's what we like to hear.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the most important takeaway you hope our listener walks away with?
I think the most important thing is to remember that negotiation is a process. It's a journey. It's not about winning or losing. It's about finding solutions that work for everyone.
And it's a skill that can be learned.
Absolutely. Anyone can improve their negotiation skills with practice and awareness.
So the next time our listener finds themselves in a negotiation situation,
Whether it's for a raise or a vacation itinerary with their family,
right,
or even just deciding what to have for dinner.
exactly.
Remember the principles we've talked about today?
Like clarifying your BATNA,
Right.
being curious about the other side's interests,
Yeah.
and being open to creative solutions.
And I think most importantly, approach it with that collaborative mindset.
That's essential.
Believing that it is possible to find those win-win outcomes.
Exactly.
Beautifully said. Well, I think we've given our listener all the tools they need to navigate the world of negotiation like a pro.
I hope so.
Who knows? Maybe they'll even start to enjoy the process.
I think that's possible too.
Mm-hmm.
There is a certain satisfaction in finding those creative solutions, those win-win outcomes.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of negotiation. We'll see you next time for another insightful exploration. Until then, happy negotiating.